spoke to them. They go and proclaim God's declarations to them. They proclaim the declaration of a judgment, the warning of what's coming. And some of the stuff you're like, what? I mean, as I'm studying it, and if you take some time and you read through these guys and study them, you'll be blown away. For real. The simple things that he uses, we'll look at it. And then he gives them a promise. And that promise that he gives them is redemption. It's spoken about in several different ways. But it's every book, every prophet, every time, God gives them an opportunity of redemption. As simple as, if you follow me, you will live. Wow. That sounds like the same message that we, as pastors, ministers, as evangelists, are giving. The same one they gave. And then he comes with the challenge. And that challenge is the same thing. It's like, you must do justly. You must love mercy. You must walk humbly. And I'll tell you, when you begin to look at your life and am I doing that, or can I do that? Man, it gets a little iffy in there sometimes. We'll look at the example that Christ gave us on how to walk humbly here in a few minutes. And so as we go through, it's kind of cool. Now, as we're going through the minor prophets, I'm going to go through them as they are listed or written or placed in the Bible. But they're not placed in the Bible historically or chronologically. They're kind of mismatched all over. It would have been really nice if the Lord had put this together so that the first minor prophet was listed, and then by year as he had them out to speak. Would have been a lot easier to study. But as you go through and you realize, you're like, what? And you end up bouncing all over the place. So to make it simple for us today, I just left it in the order it's listed as you go through the Bible, which is Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. So that's the 12 minor prophets. It's pretty cool. But can anybody guess what might be, had anybody read it, might be the first minor prophet that God used? It's the one we know the most about. It's the story we tell all the time. Jonah. Jonah was 796 to Hosea, I'm sorry. I said Jonah. Jonah is trying to get away without using my glasses here. Jonah was 798 BC. So 798 years before Christ. Jonah. And who was Jonah speaking to? Nineveh. Yeah. So, getting ahead of myself, I'm going to slow down there. So, one of the things that we need to remember about these guys is that they were just simple, ordinary, everyday men. They weren't these, rich priests, and they weren't all the kings and all these men of glory and stuff. But they were just farmers. Anything that had to do, what they had to provide for their households or their families. These are just everyday, ordinary men. Wait a minute. I'm looking at a bunch of everyday, ordinary men. Because a lot of times we read through and all these great men and women of the Bible. Man, if only I was like them. We are. We're just like them. The only difference may be, are we surrendered to His will? Are we reading to understand what He has for us? So let's go ahead and let's jump in here. One of the things I really want you to remember when we're going through, that it was the prophet's responsibility to bring the people back to worshiping the Lord when they strayed. It was the priest or the pastor's responsibility, Pastor Allen, to teach them the law or the rules or how they were supposed to live. So the prophet was calling them back. Hey, you need to come back here and worship the Lord because you've gone astray. Here you go, pastor. Clean. I caught the fish. Now you clean them, right? And then it's the pastor's job to educate, and that can be a good combination because we all have different gifts. So we take a look at Hosea. You turn with me, if you have Hosea. I guess I'm not going to get away with this. I was trying. Hosea, in verse 1, chapter 1, verse 1, it says, the word of the Lord that came to Hosea, the son of Beri, in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel. When the Lord began to speak by Hosea, the Lord said to Hosea, go take yourself a wife of harlotry, and children of harlotry, for the land has committed great harlotry by departing from the Lord. Wow. Hosea, just a common guy. You know, can you imagine the conversation around the dinner table? Hi, Mom. You know, brother, sister, Dad, I want you to meet my wife-to-be. Her name is Gomer. That was her name, Gomer, you know. And in that day and time, a harlot was pretty well known. Who the women knew who she was, the men knew who she was, right? And so here you are bringing home a harlot to sit at your dinner table and say, this is going to be my wife. It'd be kind of hard. I mean, if my son did that, I'd be quite upset. But, you know, you think about something. Let me back up, because my wife made a good point. If my daughter brought home a harlot, because there are men who are harlots. But back to the story. So you think about it. So you think about it, right? His obedience. He went and chose Gomer. Gomer comes, they get married. They have 3 children together. The crazy part is, as you study through, poor Hosea didn't know if the other 2, the youngest 2 were even his. But he raised them as though they were, because God told him to. One of the great things, like I said, God uses common people and he uses the common threaded things to give examples. He doesn't use high lofted stuff. And what is he doing here? You take a look at, you look at the whole story. So they get married, they have children. She takes off. He's now a single dad, 3 kids. And she's off with another guy, doing her business. And God says, Hosea, go buy her back. What? That's my wife. I gotta go pay for her to come back? Yeah. Wait a minute. I got a question, because I had to ask this. And I had to reflect on this. How many times has God had to buy us back? How many times have we run and left? But the cool part about all this is that he used an everyday domestic. How? He used the family to show Israel, the 10 tribes of Israel, because they were broken up at this time into the northern and southern kingdoms. And the northern kingdom were 10 of the 12 tribes. Right? Ephraim was the main one. But he used this family to show Israel, I am your husband. You are my bride. And he says, you have prostituted yourself in idolatry, in harlotry with other gods, and worshipped other things. And yet I send someone to buy you back. Come back to me. That amazes me. It really does, that he uses those pretty simple things to do that. And one of the cool parts is, in all of this, and in his obedience, God uses this tremendous living example to be an action sermon. Right? Question for you. Is your life, is our life, are they action sermons? They are. Whether it's for the Lord, or whether it's for ourselves, or whether it's for something else. Amen. The people around you are watching you. Because you know, and I know it's been said, you may be the only gospel that people ever read. And is it an action sermon, one for the Lord? God used, like you said, everyday things. He used the family to bring light to a heavenly problem. You know, and I think, wow, You are so good. Turn from your harlotry and your idolatry. Come back to me. Man, if that doesn't hit me right between the eyes. Because I can tell you, I had idol worship in my life a couple of times. One of them, in my testimony I shared, was my motorcycle when I was part of the motorcycle club. And it was everything I did focused around that. I'd tell my wife, hey, we're going so-and-so tonight. Get a babysitter. I can't get a babysitter. Throw my leg over that scoop, I was gone. Because that became my priority. At one point in time in my life, I put my wife on that throne, and she became my idol. And things weren't going the right way. And the Lord said, why would you do that? If you take your wife off the throne and put me back where I belong, things will go better and accordingly. Sometimes we don't really know what we're doing until something happens. So we have to stay in a place where we're checking ourselves. Hey, is God on the throne where he needs to be? Or has something taken its place? Idolatry is defined as anything you put before God becomes your God. So we have to be careful with that. Hosea's name means salvation. So, pretty good name for him to have, or God chose him to do this, because he's talking about come back to me, and you can be saved. So then we look at Joel, and he is preaching to the southern kingdom over there. In Joel, 2 of the 12 tribes, also known as Judah, and he comes, and Joel's talking to him. You know that old saying, he will restore what the locusts have stolen, right? We all use that. It comes from Joel. And I really didn't know that until I started studying it. I was like, wow. And that's where it comes from. If you go to Joel chapter 2, verse 25, he talks about that he will restore what the locusts have stolen. And why is that? Because God used Joel to tell the folks that at that time in the southern kingdom that the disaster